At 4:17 every morning, John woke with the same thought. This cannot be all there is. He never said it out loud. There was nothing to say it about. The career was solid. The house was paid for. The people around him were proud of him. Nothing was wrong. Then, one Monday morning, at the end of a hallway he had walked 10,000 times, there was a door that had never existed before. A brass plaque sat at its center. 5 words. The life you keep thinking about. John reached for the handle, and before his fingers touched it, the door was gone. The next morning it came back, and this time, someone was standing on the other side. To understand what happened next, you'll have to understand what John's life looked like from the outside. Because from the outside, it looked exactly right. Respected title, comfortable home, financial security, people who depended on him. He was the man other men were told to become, and every day was a photocopy of the day before it. Same alarm, same commute, same parking spot where he sat for a moment too long before going in. He wasn't miserable enough to leave his life. He just wasn't alive enough to enjoy it. When the feelings surfaced, he did what we're all taught to do. He told himself he should be grateful. Years later, John would put it in one sentence. Nothing was wrong with my life. That was the problem. That word should was the lock on the door of his prison, and he was the one holding it shut. Once the question woke up in him, John started noticing things. He noticed his employer rewarded sacrifice and called it culture. He noticed his friends joked about anyone who tried to change. He noticed the news kept him afraid, and his feed kept him comparing, and every structure around him demanded his attention, while convincing him its demands were his own desires. A Russian physicist turned philosopher, Vadim Zeland, gave these structures a name: pendulums. Invisible systems that live on human attention, that grow stronger every time you react, and that have one rule above all others: keep everyone connected. John didn't know the word yet, but for the first time in his life he could feel the chords. He lingered a moment too long that Thursday, feeling the chords, and missed his usual train. That's the entire accident of how it started, a missed train. On the empty platform sat an older woman, perfectly still while the world rushed around her. She looked at John the way you look at someone you already know and asked him one question.
Are you going somewhere? Or are you simply taking the train you always take?
John laughed. She didn't. She told him,
Most people never choose their destinations. They board whatever arrives and then spend their lives complaining about where it took them.
Before her train came, she pressed a black card into his hand, 1 gold line down the center, 3 words on the back. Wake up first. When he looked up from the card, the bench was empty. The next day, in the middle of a meeting that was designed to corner him, John tried something. Instead of defending himself, his oldest reflex, he imagined stepping out of his own body and taking a seat in a dark, empty theater. And from that seat, he watched a man named John perform on stage, watched him seek approval, watched him fear disappointing people, watched the whole familiar play. And for the first time in his life, he saw the performance without being lost inside it. Zeland called this taking the observer's seat. Waking up inside the dream while everyone around you keeps sleepwalking through the script. His boss was still talking, but the words no longer reached the controls. John returned to the stage, awake. He did not yet know that being awake gets tested. A week later came the test, another impossible project, pushed across the table with the assumption he'd say yes, because he always said yes, and then resented it, and then worked through the weekend anyway. This time John said calmly,
I can complete the current project well, or divide my attention and compromise both. Which result would you prefer?
He didn't fight, he didn't submit. He simply refused to feed the conflict, and starved of his energy. The pressure collapsed like a wave with no water under it. That evening, John left the office while the sun was still up. He stood in the parking lot, almost disoriented. If one calm sentence could bend the script that much, what else in his life was negotiable? That night, the door came back, and this time John opened it. He stepped into a gallery with no end. walls vanishing into darkness in every direction, hung with portraits that moved like living film. Every portrait was John. In one, he stayed at the company and became its president, and came home to an empty house. In another, he quit in a blaze of glory and spent 20 years blaming everyone but himself. A teacher, a writer, a bitter old man, a joyful grandfather, life after life after life. Zealand wrote that reality is not a single track. It's a field of variations, holding the script and scenery for every version of your life, all of it already written, waiting to be selected. Neville Goddard said the same thing 50 years earlier in 3 words: creation is finished. John asked the obvious question, which one is mine? And a voice he recognized, the woman from the platform, answered from somewhere in the dark,
The one you consistently choose.
He walked first to the grandest portrait. Of course he did. Wealth, recognition, a stage, an audience, a name that opened doors. And standing in front of it, his chest tightened. The life looked magnificent. It felt cold. The man in that frame had everything, and John could see somehow that he had disappeared inside it. Then he noticed a smaller portrait, half hidden behind a column. In it, he was speaking to a small room of ordinary people. Not famous, not performing, just helping them remember something they'd forgotten about themselves. His heart went quiet, that particular quiet that only happens in front of something true. And his mind objected instantly. That is not practical. Standing between those 2 frames, John learned the difference that changes everything. The goal that impresses the ego is not always the goal that belongs to the soul. One is a door someone else built for you. The other is yours. John started carrying that small room with him. Not as a fantasy of applause. He never once imagined applause. He inhabited it from the inside. The warmth of the light, the stillness before speaking, the look of relief on one person's face, the feeling of a life that finally made sense. Zealand called this a slide, living inside the picture of the life after the goal, held gently, without gripping, not watching the movie of your future, but being in the movie. And quietly, in ways almost too small to see, John began behaving like the man in the portrait. And then, nothing happened. Weeks passed. The office stayed the office. His family smiled politely at his new interest. The door never reappeared. Every unchanged morning felt like evidence that he'd been fooling himself. One night, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror and said out loud, "This isn't working." The reflection said nothing. Reflections never do. And then it landed, the piece he'd been missing. The world works like a mirror, and a mirror can only show an image that's been held long enough to reflect. He had been checking the glass every single day and using the old reflection as proof that the new image was failing. He was arguing with an echo. John said it best himself much later.
The mirror was not refusing me, it was repeating me.
He stopped demanding evidence, and he held the image. Then the company announced a restructuring. Fear went through the office like weather. Rumors became accusations. Colleagues who'd shared lunch for a decade started competing for lifeboats. Every scream of the system said the same thing: react, panic, fight for your old place. And John felt the pull, the old script reaching for him with both hands. He stood still instead, not passive, deliberate. He chose to protect his attention while the storm spent itself around him. It did not protect his job. John was let go on a Tuesday. One small box, one long walk past the desks, and Claire, his wife, standing in the doorway at home, seeing the box before he could find any words.
"You were searching for a different life,"
she said quietly.
"I didn't know ours was the price."
That night, John tore the black card in half and called the whole thing a fantasy. He applied for jobs identical to the one he lost. And here is the cruelest part. Within days, 3 offers arrived. More money, more status. The old Lifeline rebuilding itself around him, brick by familiar brick. He had awakened, seen his true direction. and was about to choose to go back to sleep. He found her at the train station. Of course he did. Rain coming down, the card in 2 pieces in his pocket, and all his fear dressed up as anger.
You told me I could choose.
You chose the destination.
She said.
You assumed you could keep every road that led away from it.
He told her losing his job could not possibly be good, and she asked the question the entire story turns on.
Did your chosen life collapse, or did the structure preventing it collapse?
John had no answer, so she gave him the harder truth.
Then you have already chosen what it means.
In his pocket, he pressed the 2 halves of the card together. The gold line met itself and became whole. What John did next is the bravest thing in this story, and it happened at a kitchen table. 3 contracts, 3 roads back to safety. One tempted him with money, one with prestige, one with the approval of people he respected. 3 different hooks for 3 different hungers. He declined all 3. Claire watched him do it, frightened, and said nothing. And John made a quiet declaration, not optimism, not denial, something sturdier than both.
I do not yet understand how this serves me, but I choose that it does.
Zealand called it coordination of intention. At every crossroads, the meaning of the event is the one thing that is always yours to assign. Call it ruin, and reality obliges. Call it a doorway, and you begin moving toward the lifeline where it was won. The next morning, in a folder he almost never checked, John found an email he had nearly deleted. A community center looking for someone to lead a 6-week workshop on life transitions. The pay was small, the door was real. 7 people came. 7 chairs in a dull, multi-purpose room. The projector failed. His notes felt like they belonged to someone else. A man in the second row kept checking his phone, and John stood there uncertain he had traded his entire life for this. Then a woman near the back looked up and said,
I thought I was the only person who felt like I was living someone else's life.
John put down his notes, and he told the truth about the 417 mornings, the parking lot, the box, all of it. The room changed. The light didn't, but the room did. And for a few minutes, John felt it. Not the same furniture as his slide, not the same faces, the same state. The lifeline wasn't coming someday. It had started, which is exactly when John came closest to destroying it. Here's the chapter most stories skip, the one where the hero almost strangles the thing he was given. Encouraged by that first room, John tried to make it grow on command. Programs, schedules, daily content, ads, recording at midnight. The warm little workshop turned into a production line, and the joy drained out of it like heat from a house with the windows open. Claire named it in one sentence.
You left the company, but you brought the company home inside you.
He had escaped one system and rebuilt it under his own name. Inner intention, strain, control, willpower, forcing what had originally arrived through alignment. So John did the thing that looks like retreat and is actually mastery. He deleted half the calendar and went back to the work itself. The real conversation happened after dark in the kitchen with no one performing. Claire finally said what she had carried for a year.
I wasn't afraid you would fail. I was afraid you would become someone who no longer needed this life or me.
And John finally saw what he'd been doing.
I thought I had to reject my old life to prove the new one was real.
They talked until the light changed in the windows, and somewhere in that night, the last piece settled into place. A true lifeline is not an escape from your life. It's the end of abandoning yourself inside it. John didn't need to become a different man. He needed to stop deserting the one he already was. 1 year later, John stood in front of a much larger room, not because he chased it, but because 7 people told others, and those people told others. He opened his talk by holding up an apple. He dropped it. It hit the floor. The audience laughed.
We spend our lives accepting certain things as inevitable because they have always moved in the same direction. Our work, our identity, our future.
He picked the apple back up.
This philosophy doesn't ask you to deny gravity. It asks you to stop assuming your present direction is your only possible destiny.
Behind him, on the screen, an apple rising into the sky. At the back of the room, John saw her, the woman from the platform. She smiled, and when he looked back, the seat was empty. Afterward, a man approached him. Successful career, comfortable home, a life that felt strangely empty. You know him by now. You might be him.
How do I know which path I'm supposed to choose?
John remembered the platform, the gallery, the box, the 7 chairs.
Begin by noticing the life you are already choosing without realizing it.
He handed the man a black card, 1 gold line, 3 words on the back. Wake up first. And across the city, at exactly 4:17 the next morning, a door appeared at the end of another hallway, and the handle began to turn. John's story is a parable. Yours isn't. If some part of you has been waking at your own 4:17, if the life that looks right has stopped feeling like yours, notice what John actually changed. He stopped wanting a different life and started intending one. Wanting waits for permission. Intention decides and then moves. So here's my question, and I read every comment and I answer. What's your 417 thought? The one that keeps coming back. Career, a relationship, health, purpose, name it below. And if someone came to mind while you watch this, the friend whose life looks right from the outside, send them this video. It might be their door. When you're ready for the map underneath this story, the real one, I made a free 12-minute video. It's at free.realitylifeline.com, first link below. That's where wanting ends and intending begins. I do not want or hope, I intend. I'll see you there.